Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plots, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. Shrubs are the anchor for landscape beds, but there are so many kinds to choose from. Today we're going to learn about Abelia. Also, fruits and nuts need pollinators if you want to harvest. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Joellen Diamond. Ms. Joellen is a TSU Extension Agent in Tipton County, and Mr. D is here. Hello. Thanks for joining us. All right, Joellen, let's talk a little bit about Abelia.
Abelia, yeah.
Yes.
It's always been one of my favorite shrubs because it has a bloom time that starts in about June, then goes clear till frost. So, I've used it, but it's more of like your grandmother's plant, the Abelia grandiflora.
Okay.
Grand.
Grand.
It gets about 6 feet tall. And so that's why it kind of limits the use in the landscape. But luckily, there are new hybrids out there, which is why it's exciting to talk about Abelia. There is another one that I liked, which I did use in my landscape, is called Edward Goucher.
Okay.
And Edward Goucher, unfortunately, is deciduous, which is the drawback of it.
Oh, gotcha.
So, but you get these beautiful lavender pink blooms, in the summer, all summer long.
Okay.
But they're not as prolific as the other grandifloras. Okay. So, deciduous, bigger flowers, nicer flowers, smaller plant. It was not a whole lot to choose from. Now we've got some good stuff. Okay. There has been one called Sherwood. Now the Sherwood eye, he gets about 2.5 to 3 feet tall and rounded. They're compact, bloom all summer long, and have evergreen foliage. And from Sherwood came Little Richard. And Little Richard is even more compact than Sherwood, because Sherwood can get taller than the 3 feet that it's usually labeled as. John Creech is another one that has come out of the Sherwoods, and he's smaller. All of these have different kind of winter colors and a little bit bronzing on some of them. And of course, then there's one that's come out that is the lowest growing of all, and it's called Prostrata. Wow. And it gets 1.5 to 2 feet tall, and there's a lot of people who use that for banks and things like that. And it will do well under a window, in front of somebody's house for landscaping. Okay. Also blooms all summer long. So what evergreen foliage blooms all summer long. The problem is our zone that this is in is 6 to 9. So we're in 7. Okay. And a lot of these stay evergreen here. Further north of 6 and sometimes in 6, if they get a zone 5 winter, it might kill the foliage back. Okay. So it might lose some of its foliage, but it'll come back. Okay. Okay. So that's really no problem. But now the most interesting things that have come out are the colored foliage Abelias. And there's one that's called Golden Glow, which of course sounds golden and yellow color, and yes it is. And it has pink flowers. Can you imagine pink flowers on gold foliage all summer long? That sounds really nice. Confetti is another one.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
It's got cream-colored margins on its leaves, and then it blooms, and then in the wintertime, those white creamy margins turn kind of pinkish, so you get a little bit of a leaf change color in that one. Okay. And they're about 1.5 to 2 feet tall, so see, these are all staying small, even the dwarf ones. The colored ones. Kaleidoscope, now Kaleidoscope is a little bit bigger, but it has multicolored foliage, which is very pretty. And then it blooms then from June through frost. Okay. So you've got this nice creamy white to pink flowers on top of this variegated foliage. Very nice. And so a lot of people are talking about it because they're fairly hardy and looks nice in the landscape. What do Abelia, where do they like to live? All right. Where does Abelia like to live? It likes to live in a well-drained soil. Now, you say, well, soils around here are not well-drained. Well, just got to be careful. just try to create a situation. Don't plant it somewhere that you know the soil is going to stay wet all the time.
Okay.
Because it'll start getting leaf spots and things that it normally would not get. Because this abelias are usually insect and disease free.
Oh, that's even better.
I know.
Right.
There's not a whole lot that bothers them.
Right.
And of course, they can tolerate drought. In fact, around town, I have actually seen them in islands in the middle of the streets. And they're blooming their heads off.
Right, and we know nobody's taking care of those, right?
No.
For the most part.
No, so I mean, it's a really a good,
That's good.
a landscape plant.
Okay.
Of course, the pH, it is adaptable. It's not real particular,
Okay.
which makes it even a better
Yes.
urban landscape plant. And it likes full sun to part shade. So now, you got to think about this. When it's in full sun, it's going to have shorter internodes between the leaves, so it's going to be more compact, and there's going to be more blooms because there's more energy for the blooms. So the more shade you're going to give this, the more larger the leaves are going to get, the less blooms it might have. And some people I've known, just because the variegated foliage in some of these, they've put them in a pretty shady situation, but they don't really care because the foliage itself is so pretty that they don't mind having less blooms.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. And of course, like I said, some of them are, there's one's listed Miss Lemon. It's a beautiful variegation on it, and it has really pretty flowers on top of it. In fact, it's known for its flowering, but it's deciduous in this area.
Ah, okay.
So, you know, but that's okay, you know, for the time of year when you're actually going to be outside a lot in the summer and in the spring, fall, and summer. You know, you'll see it with the foliage and blooming.
Okay. Now, as far as taking care of them, right? Everybody's going to ask about pruning.
Yes.
So, old wood, new wood, what is it growing?
Well, Abelia grows, it blooms on current season's growth.
Okay.
So it is suggested that you prune it first thing in the spring.
Okay.
Real early in the spring, and get it into the shape that you want. Normally, a lot of these you don't have to. They are naturally growing in a small mounding situation. But if you want to keep it under control and you want it even smaller than what
most
it
people
normally
will want to do,
want to do,
Yeah.
just don't shear it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is small leafed, and you could do that with it, but it would be better just to kind of selectively prune it down as you need to. Some of these are the larger Abelia are multi-trunked, multi-stemmed.
Okay.
And what you do is you go in and you take the smallest, the oldest stems out every few years. And then, of course, keep it down as you need to. But 3 feet is still not terribly bad.
That's not
4
bad at
feet,
all, yeah.
you know, 3-4 feet. I mean, that's not a bad size for a landscape plant.
Okay. And let me touch on this before you end, because I know Mr. D appreciate this. Deer resistant.
Yeah, this is deer resistant. And since it blooms all the time, you know, it attracts pollinators like butterflies and bees.
Okay, so it's plus, another plus.
You've got all of these qualities on these, and Abelia is just not well used in the landscape, and it should be used more.
We appreciate that, Joellen. Yeah, we need to start using that a little bit more. I see Mr. D's actually nodding his head in approval.
Yeah, you know, I've had some experience with the older ones, and the only problem I had with it was it was at my front door, and I had to kind of keep it pruned back. It kept growing out there, but as far as any problem or anything, insect or disease, nothing. So I'm real interested in these, especially the dwarf forms.
All right, well, we appreciate that again, Joellen. Hopefully more people will plant those. All right.
Hope so.
There are a number of gardening events going on in the next couple of weeks. Here are just a few that might interest you. All right, Mr. D, let's talk a little bit about fruit and nut pollinators. So you want to start with that?
Okay, just very, very important to protect them because you know, we depend on you know, most of the food we eat depends upon you know, good pollination, and it's very important if you're using pesticides to you know, the ones that you have to use during blooming times, do it at night even.
No.
You know, do it very, very late in the day or at night when the pollinators aren't going to be out there. And but just recognize honeybees are super important. Fruits when they're blooming. Even the home orchard spray guides will tell you do not use an insecticide when they're blooming.
Mm-hmm.
You know, wait until all the petals have fallen off before you add insecticide to your home orchard spray mix.
Right.
It is important to go ahead and spray during those times if you're trying to prevent fungal diseases like brown rot and some of the rots that apples get. But make sure the sprays that you apply during bloom do not have any insecticide in them. The fungicides don't hurt the honeybees and other pollinating insects. And there are other pollinating insects out there, a lot of bees. I know if you have blueberries especially, you'll see some larger bumblebee type critters out there pollinating your blueberries. And that's a good thing because, you know, we've had some problems with honeybees some, in the past few years with syndrome of honeybee disorders. And a lot of research is being conducted on trying to take care of that. Be sure that you protect, you know, make them top of your priority list to protect the pollinators.
And that's going to be on the label too, as you mentioned from our
It will be on the label.
spray guides.
Right, it will be on the label.
Now, how far apart, and I'll let you, you know, select, you know, which fruit you want to cover, but how far apart do you need to actually plant, you know, a fruit tree for good pollination?
Well, you know, honeybees are strong flyers.
Okay.
And if honeybees are doing the pollination, you don't have to be that close because they will find the bloom. They will go back to the hive and they will do what they call a little figure 8 dance to let the other honeybees know where the food source is, the nectar source is, and that little dance that they do not only lets the other honeybees know the direction that they need to fly when they leave the hive, but it lets them know how far they've got to go. So I guess they need to know how much gas or how much fuel they need in the tank. But it's very, very, very interesting. So you don't have to be that close with you know, plants that are, and that's why you may have a fruit tree that requires a pollinator and it has fruit every year even though you don't have a pollinator.
Yeah.
And your neighbor a mile away may have a tree that's the insects are pollinating that. Now, with where wind pollination is required, such as pecan trees and things like that, you've got to have them pretty close because the honeybees aren't doing the trick. The wind is actually blowing the pollen, and I know standard in commercial pecan production is every 4th tree and every 4th row has to be a pollinator. Wow. And so you know, so that's quite, you know, close. But where insects are concerned, they're going to find the bloom and they'll come to you. It's better if it's fairly close because, you know, they're spending time on this tree and then they're going to that tree, going back and forth. But fortunately, they don't go home and take a shower, you know, when they get back to the hive. So they even though it may be, you know, some time from the time they've been to a pollinator, pollination does occur.
Is it primarily bees, or is there other pollinators that kind of help out with nut and fruit production?
Honeybees are the primary pollinator, and other bees, but honeybees are just as. But on the other hand, honeybees are imported. The European honeybees are imported to the United States, and so pollination was going on before then. Right. But it's primarily bees, but honeybees now are what we count on.
Yeah, which is why we got to protect those honeybees, right? Because we depend on them, you know, pretty much for life, you know, to eat, especially out west. You know, we talk about the nuts, you know, almonds. You know, you hear that on the news all the time about how important honeybees are to the almond production.
Right. Well, all the fruits that I'm aware of, you know, pecan is the only one that I know is wind pollinated. But I mean, fruits and you know, everything depends upon pollination. As a boy, my uncle had an orchard up in the northern part of Dyer County, and he had peaches and apples, and you know, I'm talking about in the '60s, and he had honeybees out there. He, you know, we've known since we've been in the business that we need those pollinators. And they give us honey too.
Right, which is some good stuff.
Yeah.
All right,
Really
appreciate that, Mr. D. Thank you much.
Well, we've got some vinca and marigolds that we planted last year in this container with our rosemary and our parsley. They have reseeded and have come up again, so rather than let them sit down there, we're going to dig them up and put them back in our container so we'll have flowers up here. And we're going to dig up this marigold first. As you see, the stick fell down and it rooted all the way across the stem. So we'll have a lot of nice roots to add to the container here. Then we'll dig up the vinca. There we go. And we're just planting the roots. We're not trying to bury the stem. Now that we have finished planting, don't forget to water them. Now the container has flowers again.
All right, here's our Q&A session. Joellen, you help us out here, okay? Here's our first viewer email. My grandmother's yard sat idle for several years. Now small hackberry trees and honeysuckle bushes have grown into her lilac and snowball bushes. I have cut them back below the ground, but they still come back. How can I get rid of hackberry and honeysuckle growing in shrubs? Thanks so much for your help. And this is from Miss Sarah. It's a typical question we always get, Joellen. You know this in our offices. But yeah, how does she get rid of the hackberry and honeysuckle shrubs? I mean, that are growing in her shrubs.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, one thing is that root is pretty strong. So that means it's got a lot of carbohydrates in it. So that's why it keeps coming back. And you don't know how long it's there before she cuts it back, so it could build up more carbohydrates in the root system. So you need something to cut that cycle, and the best thing I can say is cut it back enough that you can see the top, and then kind of put a little Roundup on the top of that cut end. I don't
You think,
think that will...
Yeah, I think that will work.
Or 2,4-D or dicamba, you know, something on that that will translocate to the root and kill the root. That's what you're looking for.
Right.
Yeah, and none of those should transfer over to the healthy plant. And I'm saying that with a smile on my face because I tried using a different product with I had a plant growing up in a plant at my mother's, and I happened to have some Tordon, and it killed that plant. But Tordon is such a strong product. When it absorbed into the root system, it has soil activity, unlike Roundup and 2,4-D and those things. It has soil activity, and the desirable plant picked up the Tordon from the ground, and it killed the plant too.
It's a good lesson.
Even though I didn't get any on the plant. It did.
Good lesson.
Yeah.
There you have it, Miss Sarah. So yeah, just be careful. Make sure you read the label on that. You should be fine.
Right.
All right, here's our next viewer email with a picture. Like this one. Is this poison ivy? And what's the best way to get rid of it? And this is Miss Dorothy. So what do we think about that?
I use Roundup.
I was going to say,
Glyphosate.
the glyphosate,
I use glyphosate.
works.
Okay.
There's several things that will do the trick. You can use, some things seem to work better during certain times of the year. This time of the year when the poison ivy is starting to bloom and Roundup does when it's actively growing, Roundup does a pretty good job. I've had a little success mixing a little 2,4-D in with the Roundup because 2,4-D is a growth regulator and it actually causes plants to grow themselves to death, the ones that it kills, but it might accelerate the growth of the poison ivy a little bit so that it can be more rapidly absorb the glyphosate. But most of the time I just use straight Roundup, and it may take more than one application. And what I will do if it's like that on the picture, I'll just spot spray it, realizing that whatever I hit around it's probably going to be damaged a little bit, but I'll sacrifice it to kill poison ivy. If it's growing up a tree or something like that, I'll cut the stem. And it's pretty easy to recognize poison ivy vines. It's got all those hair-like structures on it. So I'll cut the vine, cut an inch of it out so it doesn't graft itself back together.
Sure.
And then when it puts new growth out below where I cut it, then I'll spray it. And it usually will be really rapidly growing then because it has such a massive root system.
Right.
And I'll let it get a little bit of growth there before I go back and spray it again. But you just stay with it and with glyphosate, and that's probably the safest thing that you can use around your around your house.
But then again, there's probably somebody who does not want to use glyphosate product. So what do we do then? Long sleeve shirts, pants, whatever, gloves.
Rubber gloves. Keep in mind the oil, urushiol, is it's what causes the problems, and it is an oil. You can't see it. It gets on you. It can get on your gloves and your pruning shears and your clothes. And it's like, oil that you get out of your lawnmower or something like that. It stays, it doesn't evaporate and go away. Get it on your clothes, a jacket or something like that, and put it on 6 months later. And grab it, and it can still affect you. So if you're going to deal with it, I Tyvek up. If I know I'm going to be, and I'm very allergic to it. Most the people that say they're not. They just haven't got it yet. When it hits you hard. Right. But you can use Tyvek and rubber gloves and throw that away. You don't have to worry about washing it. You can buy those, garden centers. It's got a lot of pesticide safety gear. But you can use that kind of stuff and throw it away when you're out there actively messing with it. But I mean, you don't want to use herbicides. You can pull it up all you want to and mow it down all you want to. It's going to keep coming back. Right. There's no way you can eradicate it that I'm aware of without using a herbicide.
Unless it's small enough that you can get the whole root system.
Pull it up by the root.
Yeah, if it's small enough, but it has to be really small.
Yeah. And the seeds are spread by birds, and you may have some seedlings out there, but most of the ones that I have in my landscape that come up, they're not coming up from a seed. There's a larger root system underneath there, and I may pull it up, and still, it's going to come back.
All right, but there you have it, Miss Dorothy. Be careful, okay? Here's our next viewer email with pictures. My tomato plants were beautiful when purchased and planted. I don't know what happened. Can you tell me what is wrong, and can anything be done now, or how do I prevent this from happening again on my tomatoes? And this is from Ms. Joy in Byhalia, Mississippi. So here's what we're going to do, Ms. Joy. We're going to let Mr. D, have the floor on this one.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Because I know he loves this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
I've seen a lot of that in
I know
my
you
career.
have. I know you have.
Would you say that's maybe phenoxy herbicide injury?
I would say yes. I would say yes.
Somewhere, I wonder if someone used some Trimec or 2,4-D or something like that, maybe in the vicinity of those tomatoes, because that looks like phenoxy herbicide injury. And I wish I could say that the tomatoes are going to grow out of it, but it depends on, I'm not sure those are going to grow out of it. Probably ought to start over. It's still early, and start over and try to make sure that hopefully you're not the one that used that. I mean, if you sprayed Trimec in your yard to kill weeds, some time ago, and then came back and sprayed those tomatoes with a fungicide and didn't do a real good job of cleaning that tank out, you could have contaminated it yourself. But the phenoxy herbicides will move, they especially during hot conditions, and you have temperature inversions, and your neighbor could have done that on their property, and it could have moved, but that's what that looks like to me.
So it looks like to me. That's what it is. Let's just say that's what it is. And you're right. I mean, a lot of people use, of course, these three-way herbicides to kill or control broadleaf weeds in their lawns.
Right.
And of course, tomatoes are so sensitive.
I was going to say, they're like the canary in the, the cave. If something's going to get on anything in your garden, it's going to be the tomatoes.
It really is. It's very unfortunate. You hate to see one that big that's affected like that.
Right.
But there's some big ones still available out in nurseries and garden centers that I've seen. So
Get them out there, and
I would agree.
Best.
hopefully it
Let's
won't
get you
happen
another
again.
All right. So there you have it, Miss Joy. Yeah, you still have enough time to get you another tomato plant.
That's right.
All right. Joel and Mr. D, we're out of time. It's fun. Thanks for being here. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is familyplot@wkno.org, and the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. Need to see how to mix up a chemical or diagnose a plant disease? Go to familyplotgarden.com. We have videos on those topics along with hundreds more like how to can peaches. Go check it out. Thanks for watching. I'm Chris Cooper. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.